motion is that the motion for the member for Vaucluse be agreed to. I call the member for Balmain.
Thank you, Mr Assistant Speaker. I welcome the fact that the member for Vaucluse has brought this motion to the House. In terms of the geographic nature of Vaucluse and Balmain, there's a lot of similarities. A significant proportion of my electorate is a peninsula, which is only serviced again by 3 roads, and which with no train stations in the whole electorate, which relies predominantly on buses and wharves. So in the electorate of Balmain, the peninsula, which includes Balmain, Birchgrove, East Balmain and Rozelle, there's particular issues which have arisen about bus connectivity and the way that the ferry system works. So can I highlight that I raised many of these issues in a private amendment statement on the 30th of May 2011. I understand the government is looking at ferry services and public transport for vision, and it's clear that a few things need to be taken into account, not only in response to the members' issues, but also in response to ferries as a whole. And the first is consultation. One of the great problems we've had in the past is very poor consultation with local government, with stakeholders in the community, to look at their involvement and their views on this matter. And a classic example of that was the removal of the Balmain East from the Balmain to Woolwich service, which reduced peak periods, which meant that the level of connectivity, in particular between the 441, the 442 and the 445, was lost. And there's a current focus on the services that are provided in my electorate between Balmain and the Central Business District and Darling Harbour, which doesn't accommodate, in my view, the broad and diverse nature of the community and doesn't understand the physical and social context. There's 2 areas of particular concern which, if there was adequate consultation, could have been better dealt with, and that is a reduction in services to Elliott Street and Thames Street, in particular because there's a very high population of people living in social housing. On the Balmain Peninsula, we've got some very significant social housing blocks around Moat Bay and around that area, and there's a significant number of aged, disabled and low-income residents who rely on public transport to access the essential facilities and services in Balmain and Leichhardt. The residents depended solely on ferries via wharves at Balmain West and Balmain, and while the transfer of Balmain East from the Balmain Woolwich service to a direct Darling Harbour service has improved accessibility for many CBD commuters, it's compromised accessibility for a number of the most vulnerable residents due to the resultant loss of access to buses from East Balmain Wharf. Many residents of Elliott Street and Thames Street areas are isolated from Balmain by the steep grades that prevent pedestrian access, and I mean steep, and necessitate the use of ferries to connect with bus services at Darling Street. So in the previous Balmain Woolwich ferry service, these residents had access to the 442, the 444 and the 445 buses at Balmain East Wharf, and these buses then permitted them to travel to the various facilities in a local area. The discontinuation of these services has undermined connectivity between Balmain East and the rest of the community, and that's just one small vignette that I wanted to introduce in this debate to demonstrate that when Minister Berejiklian and the department engage in discussion around these issues, that there's issues about the evening peak services, integration, night safety, poor timetabling and morning peak services. And I encourage the House to consider strongly the important role that ferries play in public transport, to encourage the Minister and the Department to contact the local councils that are involved, the local MPs, to ensure the most optimal possible results. And I'd also like to conclude by acknowledging the great work that the workers, the men and women at the Balmain shipyards do in my electorate. I'd like to recognise their excellent contribution to our community, and also, as you know, I was not in favour of the privatisation of Sydney ferries, but I do encourage members to try to seek to improve and augment the process and the organisation of ferries in our community.
Can I just remind members on the opposition benches that Hansard do have to record this?